Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Culture Report. I'm Antonia Velez. On Tuesday night, Trump gave the first joint congressional address of his second presidency. He spoke for nearly an hour and 40 minutes, breaking the record for longest presidential address to Congress. 9 News anchor Kyle Clark was in Washington, D.C. for the speech. Here's his breakdown of the president's remarks and a reaction from a Colorado congressman from across the aisle.
President Donald Trump's second term is off to a more impactful start than his supporters could have ever hoped and his opponents could have ever feared. He addressed a joint session of Congress amid his dismantling of a number of federal agencies and threats by Trump and his allies to withhold federal funding from Denver and Colorado if their demands are not met on a host of issues, from immigration to the justice system.
We are achieving the great liberation of America.
Trump referred to Aurora, Colorado in his address as a beautiful town destroyed by the migrant crisis. Democratic Congressman Jason Crow of Aurora left the chamber partway through the speech.
Businesses are telling me, what the Chamber of Commerce is telling me, what city officials are telling me is that conferences and visitations are starting to be canceled and going down because of these lies by Donald Trump. It's having a real impact on our community.
The administration's initial immigration raids in the Denver metro area targeted 100 suspected Venezuelan gang members. According to Fox News, caught one. The Trump administration blamed the local media for leaking news of the roundups, but did not provide evidence. Republicans in Congress are threatening to strip Denver of federal funding unless the city increases cooperation with immigration agents. About 2% of Denver's budget comes from the federal government.
In recent years, our justice system has been turned upside down by radical left lunatics.
Trump's Justice Department just launched an investigation into Colorado's prosecution of former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. She helped a hacker breach her county's voting system in an unsuccessful search for election rigging. Some Colorado Republicans have called for the Trump administration to pull federal funding from all of Colorado, unless Democratic Governor Jared Polis pardons Peters, who's serving a 9-year sentence.
This is not normal, right? We have a president who is weaponizing the Department of Justice, who is running away from our alliances and our partnerships, that's taking decades of American leadership and squandering it in a matter of weeks. None of this is normal.
We have been ripped off for decades by nearly every country on earth, and we will not let that happen any longer.
Trump defended his new trade war with Canada, Mexico, and China, Colorado's largest import and export markets. The World Trade Center in Colorado estimates Trump's tariffs will have a $1.4 billion impact on Colorado.
In Washington, Kyle Clark, 9 News.
Now, President Trump's address was met with protests from Democrats. Democratic Representative Al Green of Texas was kicked out of the chamber after he repeatedly interrupted the speech. He shouted that Trump did not have a mandate to cut Medicaid. Other Democrats chose to let signs and their attire do the talking, many bringing signs reading "No King," "Save Medicaid," "False," and "Musk steals." Then there was the moment where Republican Representative Lance Gooden of Texas snatched a sign that read, "This is not normal," from the hand of a Democratic Representative Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico. Meantime, several members from the Democratic Women's Caucus arrived at the Capitol wearing monochromatic pink. Democratic Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez told the Washington Post that the group used the color to raise the alarm about the negative impacts that Trump's policies are having on women. And in a statement issued via Truth Social, Trump gave Hamas a stern last warning to release the hostages that remain in Gaza, telling the group that otherwise, quote, "it is over for you." This comes after the White House confirmed an envoy was dispatched by Trump for direct talks with Hamas following the end of the first phase of a fragile ceasefire. One day after the first phase ended, Israel again blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza, leading Hamas to accuse Israel of a, quote, war crime. Trump has shown no indication of swaying Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu away from reigniting battle if Hamas does not agree to a new proposal. I sat down with Dr. Ahmed Abdrabu, Associate Professor of International Studies and the Associate Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver, to discuss exactly what that new proposal entails and what we can expect for the future of this conflict. All right, Dr. Abrabu, again, thank you so much for being here. What exactly does this new plan entail, and what can we expect moving forward?
Thank you very much for having me. So it's, as you said, it's totally a new plan. So the old plan was supposed to be on 3 different phases, and the first phase ended technically on March 1st. And as we talking right now, it should be phase 2, according to the original plan. But Israel changed her mind and they decided that they want all the hostages back, live hostages and the bodies. Hamas rejected. And right now there is some sort of like a game of negotiations, pressures, where Hamas is saying that they are ready to go back to war. Israel is also making the very same statement. So unfortunately, right now, it seems a very fragile situation. I hope we're not back to war, but it's highly likely if there is no agreement or a deal approached by both of them.
I know Hamas had said that it seemed like Israel was kind of shying away or straying from the previously agreed upon, I guess, agreement or clause that they would withdraw from Palestinian territory. Why do you think, is that the full explanation as to why Hamas has not agreed to this new plan?
Israel has two, and I guess there are two general red lines for Israel, and also they are red lines for Hamas. So it's kind of like a deal breaker. One is Israel insists that Hamas should not be part of any future governance of Gaza Strip. Hamas insists that they should be there. The second red line, the second deal breaker is Israel insists that there should be a disarmament of Hamas and other militias or armed groups in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, while Hamas insists that, they have been the de facto leader of Gaza Strip over the last 20 years or so. So they insist that they should continue. And right now, you never know which direction we're going, because when you have a deal breaker in a negotiation kind of situation, usually the real weight on the ground is going to decide the future of this. And I mean by that, Israel is a little bit much more weighted in terms of military capabilities.
Right.
Hamas is not as strong as Israel. However, they also know the Strip, and they have like an entire city beneath the Gaza city with the tunnels and everything. So it's not also easy for Israel to navigate the Strip right now. So yeah, these are all open questions. These are all kind of like confusing cards, and we're not sure which direction we're heading right now.
Right, and we know that the White House press secretary confirmed that the Trump administration is currently in talks with the militant group right now, which is a first. And in that same conference, she did not give a clear answer as to whether these talks cover Trump's plan to take over Gaza. I know the conversation is focused on an AI video that was shared by the president. What can we expect when it comes to this plan? Do you think that this has to do with the talks that are going on right now? What's the impact there?
I guess definitely it's very much correlated to the talks, and I guess these are all like different cards you can use to pressure the other side in the negotiation to get the best deal possible. However, Hamas is also backed by a counter plan, if we may put it that way, made by Egypt and other Arab countries to reconstruct Gaza while Gazans are there.
Right.
With a potential possible American involvement just for the reconstruction and for funding, but not militarily speaking. Again, both the plan made by President Trump and the plan made and sponsored and endorsed actually yesterday by the Arab League are not detailed right now, so we only know very little about them, but we know for sure that the main difference is whether the Gazans should stay in Gaza Strip while the very destructed kind of strip is being reconstructed, or shall they leave? President Trump made it many times clear that his idea is for Gazans to leave, and he made it also clear that he's not suggesting that they go back. So it's kind of like you're forcing them out.
Displacement.
It's displacement, which is a red line for Gaza, a red line for Egypt, because you have to ask, the second question would be like, where those people are going. Now, President Trump suggested Egypt and Jordan, and I'm sure both of them are not going to accept the plan,
right,
because it's related to historical sensitivities, it's related to national security threats, so there are so many issues here.
Well, Dr. Abdrabbuh, thank you so much for your insight. This is really an unprecedented situation that's going on right now, and we really appreciate your knowledge.
Thank you very much, and I hope that the ceasefire holds.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Trump and his advisor Elon Musk's efforts to slash government spending continues with mass layoffs of federal employees despite growing protests. The newly formed Department of Government Efficiency has shown the door to both new and career workers. Layoffs across the U.S. soared to its highest level since the summer of 2020, with the Doge layoffs leading the pack. That's according to the firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas. The company said employers cut more than 170,000 jobs, with the losses in federal jobs leading. The cuts are being felt in several major federal agencies, from the people responsible to clean our national parks to those working to give us life-saving weather forecasts. The layoffs didn't go without its hiccups. The Agricultural Department scrambled to rehire several workers who were involved in the government's response to the ongoing bird flu outbreak. And at the end of February, the Department of Health and Human Services announced new guidance on the definition of sex. It says a male produces sperm and a female produces eggs. 9 News medical health expert Dr. Payal Kohli says that this definition is problematic. First, it entirely erases the category of non-binary and intersex people by not recognizing that these people even exist. It makes it substantially harder for doctors to know how to treat them. She also says kids are much more likely to experience gender dysphoria than they did years ago. Ultimately, Dr. Kohli says we need to really think about the effects that this type of political interference could have on the medical community.
There's also something in the definition that bothers me, which is immutable, meaning it cannot be changed. So when you are born as male, it cannot be changed, or born as female, it cannot be changed. And that sort of finality of something, saying that something cannot be changed from a medical or biological perspective, to me is not scientifically accurate, and it makes it very difficult when we have someone we're dealing with gender dysphoria.
And the Oscars came and went, but reactions to the winners and the losers are still being shared on social media. The ceremony for the 97th Academy Awards was 3 hours long, so the best I can do is give you some of the highlights. Let's start with a breakdown of the big 5 Oscar categories, which won't really be a breakdown because one movie swept 4 of the 5 top awards. I'm talking about Anora, a comedy drama film that follows the up and down story of a sex worker who marries the son of a Russian oligarch. It won Best Picture, trumping films like Wicked, A Complete Unknown, and Dune Part 2, which were all nominated for the category. And out of a star-studded list of nominees, including Cynthia Erivo and Demi Moore, the Best Actress award went to Mikey Madison, who played the lead role in Anora. And Sean Baker, the movie's writer and director, took home the Best Director and Best Original Screenplay awards. The film also won Best Film Editing. And as for the sole remaining Big 5 category, Best Actor, Adrien Brody took home the hardware for his role in The Brutalist, beating fellow nominees like Colman Domingo and Timothée Chalamet. Brody used part of his acceptance speech to share his hopes for a more inclusive world and that the past is a reminder to not let hate go unchecked. And though there are many other noteworthy speeches, 2 co-directors of the Israeli-Palestinian film No Other Land also stood up for their beliefs in accepting the Best Documentary Award, with one of them taking the time to call for an end of the destruction in Gaza and the liberation of hostages. Now, I would love to break down the intricacies of these films and awards, but I am admittedly just an average movie enjoyer. Lucky for you, though, 2 fellow 9 Newsers and certified cinephiles sat down with me to have a chat about all things Oscars. First off, Anora.
Yes.
Winning Best Picture. What do you think? Because I watched it yesterday and I was just like, girl, what's going on? What's happening?
I mean, I maintain it's a really fun take on a Cinderella story that goes pretty sour. And I think it's a fun time. It starts out really heartwarming and exciting and lovable, and it takes a really sharp turn, and it's a really interesting journey. I liked it.
I'm a sucker for like character study movies, and that's what I view Anora as. Like going in, I heard a lot, oh, Mikey Madison's really good, really good. So I'm thinking, okay, she's a central character. It's going to be a lot about her. And it is a lot about her, but it's just a room for her to explore, for the film to explore her character, her journey, her growth. I think anytime you can prop up a star actor and let them do their thing, it's incredible. That's where Anora thrives the best. But also Sean Baker is so good at crafting these really intimate stories about kind of taboo subjects. In the case of Anora, a stripper and sex worker. So he's been doing those kind of stories his entire career. He knows it so well. And to see that get rewarded in such a way at the Oscars was kind of crazy to me in a really good way. Like, right. I was like, okay, this is now the kind of story that can be deemed Best Picture. And so I was happy with it. It was my number 3 movie of the year personally. So I was like, okay, top 3 gets the win. That's good in my book.
I love that, and I agree with you. I think it was a really refreshing take on something, like you said, that's very taboo, and like its traditional portrayals aren't always very fitting for it, or it leaves like a sour taste in your mouth. However, is it better than Wicked and Dune Part 2?
Listen.
And I want to hear what you have to say, because she told me off camera that she thought that Dune Part 2 and Wicked should not have even been nominated.
Yes, and I stand by that. And I
Okay,
realize
tell
that's a
me more.
controversial
Tell me more.
opinion. Jack and I like to fight about this. I think that Wicked is a fantastic movie. I think the singing in it, the acting in it is wonderful. It's lovely. But it is a movie based on a play, based on a book that's based on another movie and another book. And I don't think it did that much differently. I don't think it was groundbreaking. We haven't seen that kind of take rewarded. We certainly didn't see that rewarded with The Color Purple in that remake last year. We certainly didn't see it with West Side Story. I don't think it should have been nominated for Best Picture. Costume design, absolutely. All of those kinds of awards I think should have been given the consideration, but was it Best Picture? It just wasn't new for me. And I think Dune 2, a wonderful action movie, I don't see why it was there. It made sense for editing, made sense for sound, and set design, costuming, perfect.
Well, let me just firstly say that West Side Story was robbed and deserved so much more than it got when it was up for the Oscars.
I love this.
My take on Wicked and Dune 2. Wicked is, to me, still one of the best Broadway to film adaptations that I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
I thought they did a great job. My only gripe is with the directing side of things. So if John M. Chu was nominated, I would have thrown hands, but he didn't. So the Academy's safe for now. I didn't think the lighting was great. I didn't think it looked as well as it could have, because it's a movie all about color, and it should have popped out. That was the big thing with The Wizard of Oz. You know, the Technicolor, it was groundbreaking. And Wicked should be in a similar vein in terms of color, and it just didn't. It kind of fell flat. But everything else I thought was great. Like Rachel said, the acting, the performances, the singing, the costume design. And I'm excited for Part 2. I'm sure it's going to be, you know, on a similar scale, if not grander. I'm sure it's going to get similar love. I don't know if it's going to be a Best Picture winner, but we'll see. But I think it deserved to be there. It deserved to be one of the 10 movies that were nominated this year. Same with Dune Part 2. I didn't like Dune Part 1. It just felt like, and I haven't read the book, so maybe, you know, that was just a flaw for me. But I didn't see where it was going. I'm like, okay, it's a big, grand sci-fi action movie. Cool, it looks great, it looks awesome. Denis Villeneuve did a great job, but I'm like, what is this building to? And then Dune 2 is like, oh, this is what it's building to.
Right,
and you get a lot more of the action and the plot and the conflict, and it still looks incredible, and it's still very well acted. I was like, okay, I understand it now. And I kind of flipped my narrative and my opinion on Dune from Part 1 to Part 2. And I think, yeah, it deserves to be one of the 10 movies being considered for Best Picture.
I'm curious, Zoe Saldana, what do we think? Let's talk about Emilia Perez, because no one can stop talking about it. So I'm curious to get y'all's takes.
Just when I thought I was done talking about it. Gosh, wow. I mean, very quickly watching that movie, I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm watching. And that thought just continued throughout the movie.
Yeah.
As soon as I finished, I was like, this is going to be bottom of my rankings across the board, with the exception of Zoe Saldana. I think she's the best part of a bad movie. That doesn't mean you should win the Oscar. And personally, I would have voted for Ariana Grande. I thought she's the best she'll ever be as Glinda in Wicked.
Rachel's
and I know I can
baffled
feel
right
Rachel
now.
just fuming about this. But I think Zoe Saldana does a great job for what her character is, which I think is a lot of bad writing. But you can't deny that she gives it her all in her performance, and turns out a good performance of a poor character, in my opinion.
What do you have to say to that?
I mean, I thought Zoe Saldana was stunning in that movie. She's hard to take, you know, you can't stop watching her in that movie.
Oh, adore her.
The songs are certainly an interesting choice, but I mean, her performance in that is very, very strong. And like Jack said, you know, she has a great role in a pretty flop movie, in my opinion. The critics really loved it. I didn't, and I think a lot of other people who watched Emilia Perez had the same feeling of, what am I watching?
Why is this
For
a musical?
2 hours.
No,
Why
literally.
is it a musical?
Why? I don't know.
Like,
So-
did you even do your research about what you're writing about? Question mark. Are
And-
you even doing these communities justice? Question mark. Question
Yes.
mark.
And the Mexican community had a lot of those questions for Saldana after she had won at the Oscars,
Yeah.
and she said, "I'm really open to having that conversation. I think that this is going to be a story about women rather than about, an issue happening in Mexico and that culture. And she's saying she's really open to having those conversations, which I think is a really strong start. And I think she was really a shining light in a movie that was kind of But we do see that from time to time, rewarded at the Oscars, and I thought it was well-deserved.
I think kind of is giving it a little bit too much credit. I really did not like that movie.
I know.
But and to piggyback off Rachel real quick, I just think that, to answer your questions, Antonia, I don't think that Jacques Audiard did do his research, didn't do, to the best of his ability, the work to say, how can I tell this story in a way that is fair to all parties? Because the Mexican community, a lot of it did not enjoy how the country was portrayed in the movie. A lot of the trans community did not enjoy how Emilia Perez is portrayed in the movie. And I don't think that Jacques Audiard particularly cared about that.
No.
He cared about making this movie, which was based off his own libretto or operetta or whatever. But when you're going to do that and do it to this scale, you should put more time and energy into it, so at least you don't, because he had to expect that was going to come if he doesn't care at all about it. And if you don't care, that's fine, but you're going to get that backlash anyways.
Right, and also maybe mention the trans community or the Mexican community in your speeches in the Oscars.
Not once, not once in any of the acceptance speeches. So
I'm curious to hear what you have to say about Best Actor. Any thoughts, or Best Actress? I mean, we already touched on Nora, but any thoughts on Best Actor?
I think Best Actor still is the more interesting conversation of the two, because it was
a more open race.
Yeah, more open for sure. I said last week on 9 News it was a 3-woman race between Mikey, Demi Moore, and Fernanda Torres, because they had all won big awards and they seemed to be really in the conversation. It went to Mikey despite only picking up a BAFTA prior. Demi Moore kind of was seen as the favorite. But I think, 3 incredible performances. I would have been happy with any of them winning. I'm happy Mikey won. I get it in the context of it was just Honora's night across the board.
Right.
But I think it's important to say that just because Demi Moore lost the Oscar doesn't mean she lost the award season. She picked up most of the major awards. She's now got a Critics' Choice, a Golden Globe, a BAFTA, not a BAFTA, a SAG award. And for someone who is, later in her career had kind of been floundering a little bit, looking for big roles like that, to take a chance on a movie like The Substance, to have it succeed so well, to get so much award buzz, she's going to be set for the next 5 years easily.
Oh, absolutely.
Every director is going to want to be lining up saying, I want Demi Moore in my next movie.
For me, the performance of the year was Fernanda Torres, and I'm Still Here, but that was my personal take on that. I loved that movie. That hit a real nerve for me, and her performance was heart-wrenching. But I certainly wasn't surprised to see Mikey Madison get the Oscar at the end of the day, and I was happy for her.
Yeah, totally. I loved Fernanda Torres, the only second Brazilian woman to ever be nominated for Best Actress. The first one was her mother.
Yeah,
that was
huge.
Is
incredible.
Yeah,
she said on the red carpet, we've got the nominee DNA.
Any other surprising or remarkable moments from the ceremony?
I think Kieran Culkin's win was not a surprise. I think his speech surprised everybody. I think it's certainly an interesting take to use the first award of the night to talk about why you want 2 more kids from your life and a handshake deal they had in the parking lot at last year's
that was
ceremony.
really crazy. I do love that man, though.
He's so funny.
Love that man.
He's so endearing.
Loved A Real Pain. Oh my God, cried my eyes out. I thought it was an amazing, amazing performance. And I thought he was going to win.
I did too.
And he did.
Yeah.
He was so deserving of that award.
Oh, yes.
Great speech. And I appreciated him, even though most of it was censored out because he immediately cursed.
Yeah.
But him turning to Jeremy Strong, his co-star in Succession, who's also nominated for supporting actor, and just saying, Jeremy, I loved your work. I loved you in The Apprentice. And while I'm at it, why not get The Apprentice getting some acting love? I watched that movie. I was skeptical. I think a lot of people were skeptical of that movie when it was announced. Like, okay, do we need a Donald Trump biopic in 2024? Are we sure about that? Like, we're living it right now. But it was great, and it was early young Trump and kind of the rise of who he becomes, over the 70s, 80s, into the 90s.
Now for this week's good news, we want to show you a story that highlights the power of women in the present and the past. It's a Denver archaeologist's contribution to a women-led effort that resulted in the rare discovery of an ancient throne room that might have belonged to a Peruvian queen. This is said to be one of the only 3 thrones in Peru that suggests a woman could have ruled.
These are some of those pillars that we're finding.
1,500 years ago, this was a seat of power in northern Peru.
And here, this is one of the image of the leader, the woman, the queen, the ruler. We know her from her braids.
Dedicated to a female ruler.
But this is kind of very exciting to kind of understand gender roles a little bit better.
Dr. Michelle Kuhn says this is one of just 3 throne rooms ever discovered in ancient Peru that could have belonged to a female ruler.
Efectivamente, habían tronos, pero las representaciones de los murales nos dicen que ese trono estaba dedicado a una mujer.
I've been doing archaeology for a very long time, and this is one of those things that you just never really think you're going to be a part of, right?
Dr. Coons is the Denver Museum of Nature and Science's Director of Anthropology and Curator of Archaeology. She's one of 3 women who led the team that made this discovery.
Nos llena de orgullo, te decía, porque el proyecto está liderado por 3 mujeres.
It's exciting for the discipline in some ways because it has been so male dominant in the past.
El trono principal, la arquitectura, este templo en general estaba dedicado a este personaje femenino, a esta mujer.
The throne they discovered showed obvious signs of use.
So this is the back of that throne, and you can see where it's been worn away from somebody sitting there.
And there were items left in a basin at the foot of the throne.
We found little beads in there as well. So trying to see if people were coming and putting offerings in.
All coming together to paint a picture of this important ancient woman.
So when we actually saw what we found this past year, it's really just kind of mind-boggling.
Dr. Kuhn says it was an honor to work on this project.
You get chills, you just realize that no one has seen this in 1,500 years.
An experience she'll never forget.
It's almost like going to church in some way because you just feel like the presence of these ancient people and the stories they have to tell.
Brian Wendland, 9 News.
Shout out to photojournalist Brian Wendland and editor Gonzalo Bedoya for that story, and you can find his article as well as a Spanish version on 9news.com. Thank you so much for joining this week's Culture Report. We'll be back to continue the conversation right here on 9 News Plus and 9news.com.